You know, the future of classified, disabled, neurodivergent kids of color in our district is tied to what's occurred in our district's past. The future of our kids in this space is also linked to what's happening in our district right now. We're thankful again to all of you for showing you care about understanding the intersection of race and disability in our school district and SOMA generally by attending this event tonight. So before Dr. Bugg-Levine takes the stage, I just want to tell you all that she has served as an attorney for the Disability Division of the South African Human Rights Commission, where she drafted the initial disability let's see, I can let someone in and read too. The initial disability provisions for the nation's Equity Act. She has also worked with Supreme Court justices in Mozambique to help enforce the nation's constitutional provisions ensuring the rights of people with disabilities. She's also spearheaded the Atlantic Philanthropy's successful U.S.-Cuba policy reform campaign and contributed to the foundation's unprecedented healthcare reform campaign. She has served as a senior counsel in the Affirmative Litigation Division for New York City's Corporation Council and has also worked on housing issues for people with disabilities at the Judge David L. Bazelon Center for Mental Health Law and Family and Medical Leave Act matters for the National Partnership for Women and Families. How lucky are we here in Soma to have you as a member of our community? Like, I just want to hug you and clap and applaud you. You're so amazing. You are also, of course, the president of your own consulting company that provides philanthropic research and services to foundations and other nonprofits. You received your PhD from Yale, your JD from Yale Law School, and your BA from Wellesley. And with all of that business going on, you also were honored in 2022, I think, by the New Jersey General Assembly for your work with Jesby House. And I have to say this, Ahadi, I guess it wasn't last year, but the year before when I heard you speak at this meeting, I was so just kind of just overwhelmed and inspired by your story, your family story, that in discussing with Beth, what are we going to do for our February meeting? I said, oh my gosh, we have to have that amazing woman. We have to have, you know, Ahadi Bugg-Levine. And here you are. So thank you so much for being here. And I know we all are just excited and honored to have you. So take it away.
Vicki, thank you so much. And we're going to, as a mother, I'm going to definitely give Beth some grace because I know she's dealing with childcare issues and I get it. So I'll move on forward. And I don't think actually what I'm going to say will disrupt what she needs to present. So hopefully it'll just add to that. And I want to start by thanking everyone at SEPAC for inviting me to speak tonight. Vicki, oh my gosh, your introductory remarks are heartwarming and you're just incredible. So thank you so much for saying that. I am truly, truly honored. I especially want to thank both you and Beth because you've been so supportive and so insightful during the past few weeks as we've been going through this. So thank you both so much for what you've done. As you know, I've been asked to discuss the intersectionality of race and disability in the South Orange and Maplewood school system based on my family's experiences. And it's really, as you were saying, to understand where we need to go, we also need to understand our history. And during Black History Month, it feels like a good time to kind of look at this and see where we've been so that we see how far we've come and how far we still need to go. But before I discuss our experiences, I first want to tell you a little bit about my sister Tia. She loved music, books, and swimming. She loved people. She never met a stranger. She loved bear hugs, and when she was young, she loved being a Special Olympics athlete. She initially wanted to be a physical therapist, but because of her disability, she really couldn't be. But she pursued what she could as she went to Essex County College in order to take classes. And my mom would sit next to her because my sister's hand would tremble too much for her to take notes. My mom would sit there taking notes with her. And just so that she felt so happy and so confident being able to go through this process and this journey and to continue to learn. And T and I grew up here in Soma, so this is home. And yet we still had two completely different experiences with the South Orange Maplewood public school system. And while my mother had to address issues of extreme racism with both of her children, frankly, disability combined with racism created a wall that often felt impenetrable. My mother often says that she actually had two children who had special education needs. Then special education included my sister, who needed additional supports because she had intellectual and developmental disabilities and epilepsy, and me because I needed access to advanced classes. So Soma's educational system was only prepared to address the needs of one of her children with special education needs. I went to Clinton School, South Orange Middle School, and Columbia High School. I had the privilege of being able to go to school with my friends and to see my friends in Girl Scouts and around town, and we were always together. My sister did not have those same opportunities reliably. When she was a toddler, my one of her pediatricians told my mother, don't go to the public school system in South Orange and Maplewood. They just do not have a great reputation of helping children with disabilities. I highly recommend that you go to a private school outside of the district. And so my parents decided to do that. They first placed Tia in a parochial school outside of the area. And she did, even though it was a mainstream in the sense that they had children with disabilities and children without disabilities there, it was definitely a mainstream opportunity. It still was very different because they treated Aza not Aza, I'm sorry, my daughter. They treated Tia as part of the community, and they really tried to help her special needs as she was a student there. So she really did do very well. But the decision to place Tia in a school so far away really nagged at my mother. She really wanted Tia to be able to go out the door and see her friends from school and be able to play with them. And she wanted her to have the same experiences that I was having. So they decided to place Tia back into the public school system here. However, she couldn't go to Clinton School like me, which was our neighborhood school. She could only go to Marshall School at the time because that was the only school that was going to accept enrollments for children with disabilities at that time. So my mom recently reminded me actually about the time at Marshall when I was asking her about this to prepare for tonight. And we were talking about how difficult it was. And she said it was very clear that Tia's teacher really resented her. And so I asked my mom, I said, well, why do you think she resented her? Do you think it was because she had a disability or because she was Black? And without skipping a beat, my mom said both, because both were so connected, and racism and ableism are so intertwined. And she told me that at the end of each day, the teacher would literally wait by the door for her to come. And as soon as she saw my mother, she would approach her and start telling her about what she saw as Tia's behavioral problems. The teacher would chastise my mother as if she was a child, and my sister would have to stand there, waiting to leave and having to hear how much her teacher disliked her. When the teacher was finally finished, my mother would leave with Tia, both of them feeling defeated. And something you have to understand about my mom is she's one of these morning people, happy, wakes up the day, joyful, full of love. We were incredibly blessed to have her. And when you see my mom defeated, it has an impact because that's just not her natural way of being. And my sister, though not a morning person, she was, definitely not. She was always full of love and joy. And to see her that way also, it had an impact. And so my mom asked me, did I remember what happened when this was going on? And I said, actually, I didn't. And she said, well, you were really upset, Ahadi. And I said, okay. And she said, so you did not want your teacher, the teacher to teach your mom and your sister that way. So you decided that you weren't going to go to your after school activities and you were going to come with me. And she said, you would walk in super tall and proud next to me, and you would, when you saw the teacher, give her a really stern look. And you did this each time you came. And she said, and eventually that teacher, she got the hint and she backed down. And although I didn't remember this, anyone who knows me and knows my personality, I wasn't exactly shocked that this was my response. But it was that kind of way of treating my sister and my mother as less than an other that really had an impact on me and how I saw my mother working so hard. And so when they saw that happening, other children, they noticed. And so my mom said after that, other children started speaking up and saying, T is not actually behaving badly. She's getting picked on a lot in school. and she's getting picked on, and she tells the other kids to leave her alone. And so the teacher will say that she's yelling or she's acting out, but she's not. She's just defending herself. And so my mom, not wanting to have to face my sister to have to keep facing these battles alone with a teacher who wouldn't help her, she asked for another placement for Tia. And this district could not place her immediately. They said that it had to take time to find a replacement. And the special education social worker assigned to my mom's case, my sister's case, said that they had never met a child like Tia before. So they really had to figure it out. And so my mom just couldn't understand, what did they mean they'd never met a child like Tia before? They never met a child who had a disability. They never met a Black child with a disability. What exactly were they trying to say? And what was so unique about my sister? So during this period, the district also misclassified my sister as emotionally disturbed, not shocking considering her teacher. The classification then limited the types of schools that she could attend while she was waiting for her placement. So when my mother went to a school that was recommended by the district, they were filling out the paperwork, and they had my sister kind of go in to try to get acclimated and see what was going on in the class. And the teacher, she said, didn't appear to provide any structure, any order at all. And so when my mother returned after filling out the paperwork, my sister was literally pressed back against the wall in a corner, terrified, because she just couldn't understand all the chaos that was surrounding her. So my mom was just like, I have to take her out of this school and or not have her go enroll here, and I have to figure out another way. And eventually my sister was reevaluated and classified as having a learning disability, but my mom still had to try to find that temporary placement. And as she did, she asked if my sister could be homeschooled by the district. And she was told that no, this was not something that the district would provide for her. She could not receive homeschooling. But then another teacher turned to my mother when she was talking to her about it, and she said, actually, there's another white child who's been getting it for over a year because they haven't been able to find that child's temporary placement either. And that boy, um, he's been getting homeschooling. And so my mom, pushed really hard and was able to get those services for Tia because the district finally acquiesced. Eventually the district placed my sister at Tuscan School and in another mainstreaming class, where she unfortunately had, again, more difficulties with another teacher. And I remember one of the times when she went to pick up Tia, I remember my mom kind of going up, and Tia was really upset, and we didn't know what was going on, and her sleeves were all wet. And my mom said, what happened? Why are you wet? And she said, I had a problem with the toilet, which really kind of confused us. And I guess before I continue, I should probably just kind of comment for those who may not know, and though I think most on this call do, that sometimes there are children and adults too with disabilities who, because they get so bombarded with critiques and criticism, they'll try to focus on something really well and sometimes can overcompensate. And so they might use too much mouthwash or toothpaste or toilet paper. And for my sister, she really wanted to be clean. So she, would sometimes use too much toilet paper. And I'll admit, probably TMI, but to this day, my sister passed away almost 14 years ago. I still use single ply because I remember all the clogs in the toilet. But it's just something you live with and you deal with and you move on. But that day, my sister, when she was talking about, we're trying to figure out how could a toilet do anything with your sleeves. And she said the teacher made her reach into the public toilet, remove all of the toilet paper out of the toilet, and then wouldn't let her call my mom so that she could at least get a change of clothes in order to so that she wouldn't feel dirty all day. So she had to go to the cafeteria and eat her lunch with toilet water all over her sleeves. She had to walk around the entire day that way, as though she was marked because of what had happened. And she was just so upset. And so my parents, of course, went to the principal, and they had the teacher apologize, but I'll be frank, that it never felt like enough. Um, and so it was just a really difficult time. And then she went to South Orange Middle School, which became even more brutal with bullying. So my mother went to this district for help with mainstreaming. She went to the PTA. Both told her to wait. Mainstreaming was too new, they said. It would take time for the district to figure out how to help Tia. The PTA said that she really should not take up time in the meeting to talk about special education because it didn't really impact most of the parents in the room. So my mom couldn't even get support from the PTA. and she kept trying. And as she spoke up more and more, other parents who were also there for their children with special education needs, they started to talk to each other. And when they talked to each other, they decided to start their own PTA, which was called the Special Education Parent Teacher Association, which was a precursor to SEPAC. And so my mom learned a lot during those times. She also saw a glimpse of how white families had been treated. While all of them experienced disability discrimination, racism added a depth to the meanness and the incompetence, frankly. White parents often expressed shock at what she told them, and they rallied around her, they provided supports, and parents shared what they knew because they knew they had to support each other. My mother had to become a legal expert to advocate for my sister, and while my father worked to support the family, my mom had to take on Tia's education full time. I have literal memories of my mom sitting at the dining room table, just surrounded by papers, stacks of papers about my sister's education. My mom would then have me also review the papers because she didn't want to forget arguments when she went into meetings. And so she had me looking at everything and trying to help her practice. And I honestly believe my path to becoming a lawyer started at that dining room table while I watched my mother. Because it became clear to my mom that she could not just continue to pursue mainstreaming. So to do so would really continue to harm her daughter. So again, she sought an out of district placement. Even though my sister had to ride a bus for hours each day, she made friends. She had teachers who really supported her, and she thrived at school. When Tia graduated from high school, she was allowed to walk with her peers at the commencement for Columbia High School. She was so excited because for once, she was able to be part of the high school just like all the other children. So I now find myself, as you're talking about all of this with you, remembering what my mother told me about having two children who needed special services for their education. If my sister and I both had educational needs that fell outside of what the school traditionally provided, why wasn't our school system able to address both? Our school system was able to meet the rigors of providing AP classes, developing extracurricular activities that supported advanced academic interests, and offer additional teacher supports to help my peers and me to reach our goals of going to Ivy League colleges. Yet my mother would hear how the school system had never had a child like my sister, so my mom had to wait. And she had to figure out how to get my sister access to an appropriate education primarily on her own. She had to cobble together her own support system of special education teachers who truly cared, parents, and community leaders to support my sister. So is this all in the past? Is this just history? Well, too many parents have told me from the last time I spoke in the podcast that they've experienced similar biases in our school system even today. We are not alone in SOMA with these types of practices. Studies have shown that even today, children of color are often misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. For example, children of color are often diagnosed with autism much later in life as compared to their white peers. This means that children of color do not gain access to the supports they need to learn until too much damage has been done. I read a study that asked principals and teachers why they thought children did not receive the supports they need. And immediately they started saying, oh, it's because the parents of color, they don't want to hear about special education. They're in denial. They don't want to treat their children in the same way that their white parents do when it comes down to addressing these needs. But yet when the researchers talked to the parents, they found that white and Black parents had the same rate of acceptance and understanding of their children and wanting to help them. There was no distinction there. The only distinction was, simply put, the difference was not the parents, but that the schools treated Black and white children differently. And diagnoses and classifications matter. We all know this. We also need to look at the language we used. And I, again, talking about history, when I represented children in New Haven, there were primarily two classifications used for Black children, and they were educably mentally retarded and socially and emotionally maladjusted. And just think about the weight of those words. I would have young children beg me, 9 years old, beg me to get them classified as socially and emotionally maladjusted, which to me just sounded horrible because they were so scared of being labeled educably mentally retarded because they'd be teased by their peers. So they would beg for that. And on the other hand, while this was happening in New Haven, I remember reading a study at the same exact time, and the classification for children in the white suburb, not too many miles away, was learning disabled or having a child with a learning disability. So it was the weight of it was just very different depending on where you were. And even if the diagnosis or classification is correct, racism does not always end there. Children of color often face significant obstacles in our inclusive educational system. Therefore, when our children are diagnosed with an intellectual disability, for example, these diagnoses can lead children of color down an even more difficult path that undermines their ability to be successful in our school system. This can also make some parents distrustful of the school system and wary of placing their children in our public schools. In New Haven, they had a school for children with disabilities, which they called the end of the line for children with behavioral issues, as they put it. It was called Urban Youth. Children of color were overwhelmingly sent there. So parents of color did not even want to begin seeking special education services for their children, no matter where they were, because they were worried that eventually they would wind up in urban youth. So these types of practices really matter, and they can be chilling. Of course, what I have said also assumes that the child of color has a disability. However, we also know that the misdiagnoses or classifications can apply to children of color in other ways. Children who do not have disabilities are mislabeled because their behaviors are seen as different simply because they are Black. If a white boy and a Black boy act out in the same way, we will often hear, and Lord knows I've heard it so many times, boys will be boys for the white child's behavior. But the Black child's behavior will be penalized, more often through suspensions and expulsions or even criminalized. Also, racism itself can create disability. And I want to share a quote that I heard from disability activist Isabella Crest Nash, and she said, "Racism and ableism are often thought of as parallel systems of oppression that work separately to perpetuate social hierarchy. Not only does this way of looking at the world ignore the experiences of people of color with disabilities, but it also fails to examine how race is pathologized in order to create racism, meaning that meaning that society treats people of color in specific ways to create barriers, and these poor conditions create disability. The concept of disability has been used to justify discrimination against other groups by attributing disability to them. So as we continue to move forward, we have to look at ableism within our SOMA community. And of course, we must fully see the intersectionality of race and disability. And I want to say that, ableism does not just exist for our children. Our adults in the community experience hardships and bias as well. And as you know from Vicky, as Vicky told you, I'm the board president for Just Be House, which is a nonprofit that helps 300 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live independently right here in South Orange. And when I joined the board 7 years ago, my mom said to me that even though she wasn't quite ready for my sister to live independently yet for her, she said she always knew that Jespy had her back and that it was there for her when the time was right. And I want you to feel the same way too when your children move into adulthood. So I want to tell you a little bit about JESPI. JESPI provides comprehensive programs and services to address the diverse interests and needs of our clients, including residential, recreational, athletics, counseling, vocational, and other supports. Many young adults start out in our day habilitation program where they participate in our transition services, which helps them to transition from child to adult and provides them with those skills. JESPI offers hundreds of services and programs each month. Our clients learn self-advocacy, safety awareness, coping mechanisms, conflict resolution, and other skills. JESPI offers these services throughout our clients' lives. For example, we not only help our clients get jobs, we also help them to maintain their jobs and then to advance in their jobs because it's not one and done. We want to be with them throughout the scope of the life of their journey and through independence. And I asked Jespy for some tips to share with you today in terms of looking at, for those of you who may be thinking of those next steps into adulthood. And they gave me three, and I want to share them with you. One is to apply for DDD as soon as possible. And I'm sure many of you already know that. Select the right day program for your family member and really explore what's out there. And day programs are key to enhancing social skills and pre-vocational skills. So it's very important to look at that. So please keep this in mind as you consider your and your children's options over the years. I say this not to make a shameless plug for Jespy, but because I want you to feel like my mom, that Jespy has your back if you should need us and if we can help. And even with all the great strides our community has taken, not enough has changed for people with disabilities and their families. Too many families struggle like mine did to find programs and services for their children. When their children become adults, it becomes even harder. I am often stopped at the grocery store, car washes, pharmacies, and even bathrooms to answer questions about Jetsby House. COVID made parents even more aware of their adult children's needs. And families need to be able to call a specific person within SOMA with their questions about supporting a loved one with a disability. We get questions all the time, especially from people who are new to the community and they don't know who to call. We tell them about SEPAC and we tell them what services that we know about that are available, but we're not their service provider and they should have somewhere to go in order to ask those questions to help their children, to help their loved ones who are adults, in order to integrate into our community. And while we have great organizations like the Community Coalition on Race and the Two Towns for All Ages, we don't have the same types of supports for people with disabilities. And we can't just think of schools when we're talking about children. We have to look at the entire life of the child. We need to think about camps, social activities, sports. Where are all the ways in which we can have our children be whole? And the same goes with our adults. What are all the different ways that we can help provide supports and provide social activities and events that really look to the completeness of the person, so that their families and that people with disabilities can really truly integrate into our community? Being on the JESPY board has also given me greater insights into the bias that adults with disability experience here. Residential services are essential for our clients. I've seen too many clients cry because they are scared of becoming burdens to their parents as they grow older. They desperately want to develop the skills they need to live independently, to know how to do everything from washing their dishes and learning how to use a microwave to traveling and commuting for a job. This is what they want to do. They want to be independent. And to provide residential services, Jespy has bought properties in South Orange. We have been in South Orange for 45 years. Yet our clients are often not seen as part of the neighborhood or the greater community that they know and love. Current and former board members who have been involved with the Jespy for decades have shared that every single time we've purchased a property, we have been asked to find another location. Every single time. I have had a number of our Jespy neighbors tell me how much they love Jespy, and this conversation comes at me this way almost verbatim every single time. I love Jespy. I love what you do. It's just, I'm worried that if people are coming here to look at South Orange, that they may be overwhelmed, or it may worry them to see so many people with disabilities, and it may impact the property values, and our houses won't sell if we go and get the same as if they were in another part of town. So this is really why I'm concerned. It's not because of Jespy. I love Jespy, but it's just you may affect our property values. And I've heard this so many times. Our town's motto that everybody belongs here and NIMBYism cannot walk hand in hand. You cannot say that you love Jespy, but want our clients to be invisible or not have the same opportunity to live here as so many other people who move here do. We need to assess how ableism impacts our community. We especially need to evaluate how ableism differs when considering the intersection of race, gender, or economic status. Because one of the things I will say in terms of economic status, we were blessed because my dad worked full-time and worked hard, so my mom didn't have to, so that she could support Tia as a full-time advocate. A lot of parents don't have this luxury, and it was a luxury that we were so thankful that we had. For everybody to truly belong here, we and our loved ones must be seen, heard, and supported. And I want to give just a few quick examples. For example, we need to continue to make changes in our educational system so that children with disabilities have access to appropriate education that will allow them to reach their full potential. We cannot be told to wait any longer. Children and adults with disabilities need to have access to recreational and educational activities that address their full interests, just like others in our community. We need to have a body that supports members of our community with disabilities, just as we have CCR in two towns. I know this was a lot, and I thank you for staying with me, and I thank you for listening this evening. Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to the discussion to follow. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the work that you do in our community and frankly, that you have done around the world. Thank you so much. Now, Kerri, I have a bio here. I know that you have your presentation, which includes some autobiographical information, but do you want me to read your bio
Sure.
or? Okay, I want to. So everyone, prior to Kerri's appointment here as Director of Equity and Access for the South Orange Maplewood School District, Kerri served in several leadership roles in both curriculum and building leadership. She spent 4 years in the Prospect Park School District as the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. She also worked on evaluations and assessment. She was also the principal in Florham Park and of the Apple Montessori Elementary School. Kerri began her career as a high school teacher in Clifton, and she taught for 9 years before becoming an administrator. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Anthropology, as well as her teaching certificate from Montclair State. She also holds a Master of Arts in Social Sciences, as well as a Master of Arts degree in Educational Leadership also from Montclair. And currently, Kerri is pursuing her doctoral degree from Centenary University. And we're just so, again, grateful that you are spending some time with us tonight and that you did some work, crunching some numbers and looking at some data to present to all of us. So we're really grateful to have you here, especially Kerri shared with us before the meeting officially started that she's creeping up on her year in the district. So congratulations on your year here in Soma. We're so grateful for your time tonight. Thanks, Kerri.
Thank you so much. I am new for 7 more days. So, and then I can't call myself new anymore. So it's great to be here. I want to thank you for reaching out to me. I appreciate the topic of intersectionality because I believe that it is in that intersection that there's beauty, but also heartbreak, which we've heard tonight. And I hope that I can shed some light on some of the things that the district is embarking on to address some of those issues. And I really appreciate your story tonight, Dr. Ahadi. I really, really do, because I think that it provides the human side to some of the work that we're doing. I'm going to share a presentation. I think I can do that. Let's see. Okay. And are you seeing anything? Excellent. Okay. And you can still hear me, right? Okay. So I always like to start off talking about, who I am. I'm much more than the person who sits in an office or works at a district. I'm a mom of 4. I have twins and 2 others. I always say, and I can say full sentences at the end of the day, that's a win for me after 4 kids and working all day. So daughter, sister, aunt, student, lover of books. I always like to point out, I'm not an equity warrior because I think equity has to happen in partnership with others. And so I try and partner with all of our families and administrators and students and teachers, because I think this work has to be done together. And I think that's super important. And I also think you always have to be a learner, right? This work is ongoing, and you can peel back a layer every single day and still have 100 years of learning to do in the area of equity. So I am going to start off the night breaking down some numbers. This is our district percentages of race and ethnicity. Many of you who have seen any of our presentations knows that this is the breakdown of our race and ethnicity. I think it's important to note the different percentages as we look at data of who's in what classes and programs, because there is disproportionality in special education across the country, and it's an area that we continue to work on. So one of the rules in New Jersey, just to talk a little bit about why you see the letter N, is if there are less than 10 students in any given category in New Jersey, we have to suppress that data. And that's a rule from the New Jersey Department of Education. And really that rule is to protect so that you can't say, oh, I know the one kid, fill in the blank, that, you know, didn't do well on a test or is in that classroom. But to really look at the numbers here, we know that, I'm going to go back for a minute, that 23% of our population is Black and 53.9% of our population is white. And then we look at our programs for our self-contained classrooms, and those percentages are reversed. And so there is a difference there in our numbers. And I show percentages here. And so there definitely is a difference. Well, these are each of our self-contained classroom programs that we have, our LLD class, our emotional regulation, our ERI class, multiple disabilities, autism class, and our full day preschool disabilities class. And we see that there are differences in our numbers, and that is something that we are looking at. And we'll talk a little bit as the program progresses on some things that we're doing to work on that. This is our numbers on inclusion and pull-out replacement by ethnicity and race. Please know that these numbers are 1,294 are not the amount of students that are in these classes, because students are duplicated in this data. For example, you might have a student in a pull-out in an inclusion class that also takes a pull-out replacement class. So there might be duplication in there. You might have a student in a self-contained class that also goes to an inclusion class in a particular, maybe they take a social studies class in an inclusive setting. And so these numbers, there's about a 300 student duplication rate within these numbers. And so again, we see that the numbers don't totally represent that beginning pie chart that we had with our percentages. So because of our suppression data and the numbers were too small, I am providing special education and JSLA data, but I was not able to do that by race and ethnicity because the numbers just got too small by grade. I did want to show that there's some areas where this data represents 2019 NJSLA data in math and 2023. It's important to note that these tests, because it's before COVID and after COVID, were normed very differently. They are not apples to apples, but that we can put them against each other to recognize just a trajectory of before and after COVID. I know Victoria wanted me to talk a little bit about our COVID numbers and what they looked like. And what we did was, if there was a significant decrease, so this column is students that did not meet expectation, and we want these columns to go down. So we want less kids not meeting each year, and we want more kids growing in these two columns, met and exceeded expectations. And so in our math, we see that in third grade, these numbers grew only by a fraction here, but they still grew. And that our students that met expectations were lower in 2023 in grade 3. In grade 4, our students that did not meet or partially met did go down, which is great. They did move to this approaching category, and our met went down slightly. And in 5th grade, our students that did not meet did go down here. but did go up in this category. And so we know that math was exceptionally hard during COVID, that it was even more compacted with students with disabilities, because a lot of our students with disabilities, and especially our young students, use hand-on learning modalities, need their teachers right next to them. They are counting, they are moving money. And I remember as a curriculum director, my teachers would go, all right, get the forks out of the drawer, because they didn't have their materials. So students were counting with forks and spoons. And so we are working to continue to move our students forward, but that is definitely, math was a harder lift, and a bigger gap in COVID. Okay. ELA looks much better. So with our students with disabilities, we did see students in grades 3, 4, and 5, all of our students that did not meet or partially met expectations, that number has gone down, which means that there are less students not meeting expectations last year than there were 4 years ago, which is great. And that is the case for MET also. So students are increasing their reading ability in grades 3, 4, and 5. I specifically picked grades 3, 4, and 5 because those are, I call them our COVID babies. They are the kids that were most impacted, because these are your kindergartners, your pre-K kindergartners and first and second graders. And when those kindergartners and first graders left in March, I remember, that March in kindergarten is when that light sometimes turns on for letters or something like that. And so I really wanted to focus on that. And so this data is super promising for our students. We do know across the country, specifically for our students of color, that they are hit harder with the decline from COVID. And so that's something that we want to be especially mindful of, is that we have to make sure that we're supporting our students of color throughout the classroom so that we can lower the numbers of students that are not meeting expectations. And that is on us as a district. And so what I want to do is go into some of the things that we're doing to really support our students in the area of equity and also academics. So the things that we're doing to address COVID learning loss specifically, and this is a small list, there is much more, but just to specifically look at, we just brought in a new K-5 math curriculum resource. Our teachers are working with it as we speak. We are also piloting a new phonics program. Now, we know that students of color are significantly affected by the reading process that we've seen over the last 20 years, and that phonics using science is an effective way to teach reading instruction. And so we brought in a new phonics program that should be K2 across the district next year. We also know that providing Tier 1 instruction, like a strong science-based reading program, decreases referrals to special education, because students are getting really great core instruction. And so this is one way to decrease that disproportionality. We also are reinvesting in our INRS process, training teachers and administrators and building data collection tools. And that is a little bit about what we talked about earlier. Dr. Ahadi Bugg-Levine talked about the over referral or underrepresentation in special ed, and our students of color are hit on both sides of that. And so having a really strong INRS process really pushes back and supports the teacher's instruction to make sure that they are providing every bit of support to that student, so that a student who may not have a disability can effectively learn in that classroom. Also focusing on Tier 1 instruction through our coaching. Our coaching process is only about 2 years old, and our coaches push into all grade levels for language arts and math and science and social studies. And so they support that tier 1 instruction, which is how a teacher really can differentiate learning for all the different learners. Research has shown that the amount or type of learners, we used to think it was 7, that your learning profile is as different as your fingerprint. And that is not for the student with disabilities. That is for every student in the world. And so our teaching needs to reflect that difference. The last thing we've done is through special education, the IEP team has reviewed the progress for each student and compared the process that they would have expected, the growth they would have been expected to have if COVID hadn't occurred, and then provided compensatory services and or interventions and supports to the students as appropriate to help them learn and have the growth that was expected originally before the world shut down. So there's a lot of research on ways to decrease disproportionality in special education, and they all came down to, a lot of the different research papers really talk about these 4 things. Is 1, having a strong tiered system of support, not only for academics, but also for social emotional support, and building that strong INRS process. We talk about that Black students, especially our boys, are classified with emotional regulation disability more than they should be. And part of that is schools labeling behaviors differently for Black students and white students. And so when we really have tiered support and support students in behavior and have a social emotional learning program, that is able to help that process so that we're not over referring students who do not have a disability. And that's really important. The second part is really universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. And that talks to the fact that all students have different learning profiles, like we discussed before. And really, how do I teach in a classroom and know what each kid needs and give them that support? How do I do that? How do I support choice? How do I give students more autonomy? And that can happen in all classes and looks very different. For example, in our ERI class, that might look different than in our inclusion class or in our pull-out replacement class, but that all students need choice and they need to have some semblance of choice in their learning and autonomy in their learning. The third thing we're doing is really supporting culturally responsive teaching. And what does that look like? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but making sure that, 1, we are representing all the students in our curriculum teaching, but also holding students to high academic standards, but also with support. And that is key. And 4 is restorative practices and really understanding what that looks like. So the first and second we talk about is that MTSS and UDL, multi-tiered system of support and universal design for learning. So like I mentioned before, we've reinvested in our INRS with training and for administrators and teams of teachers. And next year, that professional learning will grow with individual teachers, ongoing professional learning in the area of tiered support and strategy groups, and tier 1 interventions in classrooms, including that UDL, making sure that students have different ways of representation. I may not learn it when I see it. I may not learn it when I hear it. I may learn it when I touch it and when I feel it and when I experience it. That each person's learning is different, and our teachers respond to that difference and support them where they're at. And ongoing support in our tier 2 and tier 3 instructions. What does it look like if a kid needs more help? How can I do that prior to classification? How can I do that irregardless? How can I give that layered on support? If this isn't working, what do I try next? And really helping our teachers identify that is key. The The third one is culturally responsive practices, and we're doing a project that's really near and dear to my heart. We are doing an equity audit for our curriculum right now. We are in the process of doing the equity audit for social studies, science, ELA, and math this year, and next year we'll continue with other subjects. We're using NYU's Steinhardt's culturally responsive audit tool and the Great Lakes Equity Center tool. And these are the questions that I want students to be able to answer. Can I see myself reflected in the curriculum? Can I learn about others' perspectives in the curriculum? Who is writing this story? Is it representative of who I am? Does the information, learning experience, and stories represent my culture and the full body of my experiences? Not just that of the hardships, right? The full body of my experiences. I can have a disability and a crush. I can be Black and excited for a National Honor Society, right? We can do both. It doesn't have to be only about I'm in a wheelchair and that's the whole book about me, right? And so we want people to be able to see themselves, that full body, that range of emotions that people can have, the joy and the excitement and the hardship all together. And do I have access to rigorous curriculum for myself and the autonomy and choice in the topics that I choose to learn about? So these are just some examples of the questions in the audit. So does the curriculum communicate an asset-based perspective by representing people of diverse races, classes, gender, ability, sexual orientations through their strengths, talents, and knowledge, rather than their perceived flaws and deficiencies? And I want to just point out when Dr. Ahadi pointed out that her mom would hear about just the negative when you did the pickup. Right? We have to look at students' asset base. What do they bring to our classroom? Why are they wonderful? And how can we leverage that beautiful wonderfulness in our classrooms? And I think that is so key, and something that we really want to look at in our curriculum is how can we leverage that asset for every kid? Every kid is beautiful and brings something to the table. Their culture, their personality, they have something to give. And if we look at what math they can't do, what reading they can't do, that breaks people down, right? And so we want asset-based view of our curriculum. The second example is ableist ideologies that depict people with disabilities as disadvantaged or that they only serve as inspiration are challenged. We're challenging that notion that people with disabilities are depicted in terms of their careers and their contributions to society and active members of community. So we're looking at our curriculum resources and saying, what are the depictions of people with disabilities in our curriculum? What does that look like? Are we only looking at their challenges? Are we looking at what they have done to contribute? And they have done a lot. And finally, curriculum materials avoid referring to one group of people as granting or giving privileges or rights to other groups of people. The next thing we're doing to promote culturally responsive teaching is we are creating a multi-year program to develop a culturally responsive framework for our teachers. So not only does that help teachers hold students to high academic standards while supporting them, which is key, but also it's prioritizing belonging and relationship building as a way to connect to students and support learning. Because without those relationships in the classroom, students cannot learn. And then focusing on asset-based learning, which we just talked about. So students, their culture, their experiences, their ideas are all assets to our environment. And we focus on what they're ready for and not what they don't know. And so our professional learning around this will take part over a 4-year program where teachers can build their capacity and really understand this culturally responsive framework. The third thing we're doing is around social emotional learning. And we really want to make sure when we're talking about social emotional learning that is equity minded. Some districts are finding that when they're doing social emotional learning, especially with students of color, that we focus on compliance. Are you following directions and listening to directions instead of really building on goal setting or relationship building and decision making? And so our teachers that are involved in this, there's about 20 teachers across the district, and Ms. Carrera and I work with them. And we use an equity framework, working with Castle, and we're studying social emotional learning lesson planning through Japanese lesson study, where teachers go in and teach, and then we observe and provide feedback on those lessons. And so we're really excited. We're building a series of lessons that can be supported throughout our elementary school, and then building upon social emotional learning in 6-12 as well. So we're really excited about that. The final is our refocusing on restorative justice, which is really practicing how to build community within a school or classroom. Schools across the country sometimes look at restorative justice as a way, an alternative to discipline, but that is not what it is. It is an engagement in community, and it is to build relationships so we can provide equitable learning environments for all kids and really nurture those relationships between students, between parents, between students and teachers. And so we are very excited about that. The last thing, which we did talk about, how students with disabilities and students of color are at risk for bullying. In New Jersey, bullying has gone up since 2017. This is the recent bullying anti-bullying task force data. And so we want to make sure that our students are in safe learning environments. And so just a few things that we've done this year is we've instituted a new curriculum from the New Jersey Bar Foundation for bullying. We've increased training for our anti-bullying specialists and really focused on what that investigation protocol looks like, especially when we're supporting students who are multilingual learners, supporting students with disabilities in the HIB process. They might need to have their case manager help them during the interview process. What can we do? They might need additional accommodations through that interview process. More professional learning around bias in the HIB process. How do we ensure that bullying investigation is bias-free? And a creation of database to support students who take part in bullying. So instead of saying, okay, you bullied someone, don't do that again, how are we supporting these students? What lessons are we providing? What readings are students taking part in? What activities are students taking part in? As well as really training our climate teams so that they can support school climate and address the needs of each school. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I know that was a lot of information, but we're doing a lot. So I just want to thank everyone. So we are working hard, and there's a lot to do, and we're excited about doing it. And we appreciate and know that you are sharing the greatest gift with us. You know, mom of 4, you know, I want my kids in a safe, loving environment where my kids can grow, and I want your kids to have the exact same thing, and we all do.
Thank you so much, Kerri. I think it's, you know, just so interesting, the juxtaposition between what's going on in the school, what was going on in the school, and especially Dr. Bugg-Levine talking about the community, right? And what the community, SOMA in general, what work we need to do to help disabled people live richer and better and fuller lives in our community, and how that starts with a school as being a kind of entry point from the home to the larger world. So I just really want to thank both of you, for your information and your heart and your sharing tonight. And do folks have questions? If you want to raise your hand, if you want to put your question, your comment in the chat, that would be great. We had some earlier thoughts. So do we have any questions? Comments are good too.
I have a question.
Great, thanks, Amanda.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much. This was super helpful and enlightening. I have a question just about the data points, and forgive me if I missed this because it's like a busy hour in my home, but do we have any data on like post-secondary outcomes for our special needs, for our students receiving special services, and any discrepancy, for English language learners or students of color?
So I can jump in on that. Yeah. So we do collect that data for the state, like X number of years after students graduate for our students with disabilities. So I don't have that right in front of me, but that is information that we can pull. I don't know how broken down that information is, so I would have to pull it and kind of look at it and see what's there. And part of the issue with that, sometimes we run into, we can't always get back in touch with the students after they leave. So, sometimes we don't get all the data that we're looking for, but there is some data there that I can go back and see if I can get a hold of. So I can look at that for you. Okay.
Well, thank you.
I think my question would be kind of data related on the flip-flopping of the data of what our district looks like and what our classes look like. And if there's a way to also look at students who are out of district, either through the district or unilaterally, and look at the racial breakdown of those students. And then if you add all of that together, do the numbers even out a bit more, or do they still look really flip-flopped? And I suspect that they would even out more, but I don't know. I think that would be a good thing to look at if we can.
So that's also data that we can go back and pull and take a look at. So we don't have that tonight.
That's a lot of like hand massaging that data, I'm sure.
Yes.
But I think it would be an interesting exercise to take a look at that.
Okay.
Hey, Jocelyn, go ahead.
Thanks. And thanks, Ahadi. And I'm going to add to Ahadi's resume that she was recognized by the coalition. She got an award last year at our gala for all of her service to the community. I have some questions for Kerri. I understand that for the third, fourth, fifth grade data that we can't break it down specifically by race because of the small numbers. Can we get it white, black, other kids of color? Can we get it like that?
I don't know, 4 years later, I'm still talking on mute. So it's the possibility of doing students of color. I did play around with that. A lot of the grades, depending on because it's students with disabilities and students of color, you really are getting less and less. And a lot of those numbers were 9, so there was a lot of suppression data. So and I find it hard to look at with suppression data because you've got one number here and then another number here. It doesn't allow you to really look at it. I will tell you that we are doing this work. We are peeling back the numbers because that part of that is really important, right? Is that for us to understand that and then to plan in our curriculum supports is super important. But the suppression data, there was so many that were under 10.
Okay, thanks. And then,
Hey,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, Justin, go ahead.
The HIB numbers, I just wanted to ask, are HIBs by teachers on students also included in your HIB data?
So the HIB data that I showed you is actually the New Jersey Task Force. That's across the state. Our data is, you asked if it was by teacher?
I asked if HIBs by teachers on students or by staff members on students were also included in that data, or if that was just student on student.
No, I believe that includes all HIBs, because that information I believe was captured through SDSS. I could be wrong, but which every HIB in our district and in all districts has to be captured through our student safety data system, regardless of who the offender is, student or adult.
Thanks. And then lastly, I just a comment on, oh no, I had a question actually on detentions. You talked about restorative practices, and I see at the high school level, that's not happening as much as we would like it to happen, or as much as you would hope that it was happening through a reading of the code of conduct. So I wondered if you had detention numbers by race and by classification for the last 2 years, say, to compare year over year. It seems like we're using detention a lot more this year than we have in the past.
I don't have that at my fingertips. I do know that our equity teams are, over the next month or two, going to start looking at discipline numbers through race and ethnicity. I don't have that with me right now. But one of the things that I think is really important is we're starting to look at what are some ways that we can put in those restorative practices, really that community building first, which is key to building restorative practices. Most school districts start with the middle level of what to do when a kid does something wrong. And really the way to build restorative practices so that it works is to build that community. Because if I don't know you, then I don't care that I did something wrong to you. So we want to build that community back in so that restorative practices works, because I care about my person that's next to me. I care about my classmate. I care about my teammate. And so that's really what we're going to start focusing on to start as a reinvestment, because we've been doing restorative practices for a long time, but that reinvestment, we're going to start on that community building piece.
That's great. I also see, or at least I don't see the looking for the why behind the behavior before you punish the behavior. I think we're missing some of that this year in particular.
Well, I'm writing that note down. I appreciate that.
Okay. And then my last note was just a comment. I had my last Columbia IEP meeting today. And for a second, I thought it was my last ever IEP meeting. And then I remembered I have an out of district kid in an 18 to 21 program, so it's not. But I had my last Columbia one. And you were talking about the culturally responsive practices versus focusing on the negative. And we had one teacher who only focused on the negative, and the other teachers did not. And because of that one teacher focusing on the negative, I had to pop down to school and give my emotionally fragile kid a hug, because she wasn't able to get through the rest of her day after that one negative teacher. So I think our teachers can always use a reminder not to focus on the negative, to start or lead or mostly talk about the strengths, especially when the kid is present, which is, as our kids get older, hopefully they're all present.
Yeah.
And that's it. Sorry, Vicky, it took too long.
No,
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you. We have Lynn Irby Hill. Hey, Lynn.
Hi, please excuse my voice. I'm getting over being sick. This is just a comment for Ahadi. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your presentation. I'm the principal of South Orange Middle School, and we have been working this year on developing a partnership with the Jesby House. A couple of months ago, we've been working on a Words Matter campaign, and we actually delivered a couple hundred butterflies. We did a project called the Butterfly Effect to the Jesby House. We were working with Frank I believe his last name is Bresnik. So we really want to continue our partnership with the Jesby House. They actually came a couple of years ago. We had a program and they were our ushers. So we were really excited about that and just want to continue the partnership. That's all.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Lou.
Thank you.
Love partnering with the community. So thank you so much.
Hey, Lindsay Stone. Hey, Lindsay, do you want to take yourself off mute?
Sorry, I just did. Thank you. And hold on, I'll take my hand down too. I put my comment in the chat, but I just kind of wanted to expand on two things. Ahadi, thank you so much. And some of what you said like resonated with me still today, like with our kids. Like we've had teachers be like, we don't know what to do with your kid, so it's like, it's sad. It's sad to hear that, some of that is still happening now. But my question, Kerri, thank you so much for all the data. It was so helpful. We're super, as a SEPAC board, always talking about like social, emotional learning, and how that's so important. And so I would love to hear just some more like tangible examples of walking through like what that training and those programs look like some day-to-day examples. And also same with like restorative justice. A lot of what Jocelyn was saying is important in terms of like looking at the why things are happening before reacting. So, and you're talking about like the community focus. So I just wanted to hear like a little bit more detail about what that looks like. Those words are thrown out a lot, and it's good for us parents to like understand how that's actually happening.
Sure. So I'm echoing. Okay. So our social emotional learning program, we actually just started in December. We took, Zoila Correa and I took a group of 20 teachers, and we are breaking down, I'm going to back up. Last year, I worked with a team of teachers, administrators, and social workers with Zoila, and we chose a framework. We went through 40 different social emotional learning frameworks. And we identified CASEL as the one that we felt best represented everything that we wanted. We wanted to make sure that it was equity focused, because a lot of SEL, as I mentioned, can have bias baked right within it. And as it is presented can also have that. So we wanted something that had a really equity-minded focus, and CASEL does that. And then we are focusing our work over the next year on the 5 competencies. So the first one being self-regulation, the first one being self-awareness. So who am I? How do I feel? What are my goals? What are my likes and dislikes? Then self-management. So how can I set goals? What do I do with my emotions? Then we have social awareness, so relationship building, and decision making. And so what our teachers are doing right now is they are creating a series of lessons that are using the standards of CASEL, that framework. And then they are going into each other's classrooms and developing those lessons further through a process called Japanese lesson study, which is used around the world, mostly in math, to really hone in and develop lessons more fully. And so our last one was emotions can change. And so students often, and teenagers often feel, I'm sad, I'm going to be sad forever, right? I'm mad, I'm going to be mad forever. They don't recognize that emotions can change, and that sometimes we can change emotions, sometimes other things can change emotions. And so we're building lessons that help students understand that. Our next series we're going to work on is more of that self-management. So what do I do when I feel this? And also goal setting. So I have these likes and dislikes. How can I then set goals around them? And so that's some of the social emotional learning we're working on. And again, it's in its infancy stages. We just started this work in December. We're on our 3rd meeting. And our goal is that each one of these teachers in the schools, and there's going to be 2 to 3 teachers in each school, are going to be leaders in this work next year as they push it out. So, and as for restorative practices, we're in our I don't want to say infancy stage, because we've been doing restorative practices for a long time, but we're in our infancy stages of redeveloping it. So we're working with administrators on really looking at not having it lead as a disciplinary replacement, and really saying, how do we build community? And so that's what we're working with our administrators on, talking about what the original intention of a restorative justice education was, and that is to build community so that we all care about each other. And so when we do harm to others, we have a relationship that we want to build back, which is super different than a lot of schools are like, well, I had a circle when 2 kids got in a fight and 2 weeks later they're still fighting, right? And that's a very different model. Right. And so we're starting to, and Dr. Gilbert, I'm going to throw you he is the resident expert in this. And so just throwing you some props over there. But so he's really been leading that work, and it's been great. But it's, again, very, very infancy.
Thank you so much. It's so great to hear that. I think it's a really long time coming, and just thank you for the work, and please keep going with it and getting more people on board with that. I think is so important.
Thank you. Passion projects of ours. So we will keep doing it.
Good. Hey, Beth, we see you, Beth.
Hi,
Beth,
thanks.
our fearless leader.
Oh, well, yeah, my daughter will be up here any second. I'm sure now that I turn my camera on. Yes, thank you, Ahadi and Kerri, for being here. I wanted to follow up on some of what you were just saying, Kerri, and make maybe a recommendation about how to involve families as as you're building community, right? To engage the families so that there's that crossover between home and school, because you can do all that work in school, but if we don't know what's going on, then we can't support that work. So to make sure that all the wonderful things you are doing, that parents are finding out and being engaged in all the different cultural appropriate ways. So I know that that's something that's on your mind, but I just want to bring it up because it is, it's really imperative, right? I mean, it's not going to work unless we all are here doing the work. And there are families, how many people are here? 33, there are a lot of people that, are want to support it, but just don't know. So how do we reach everyone? And everybody here on this call, share this information. It's really so much of what we learn is just through talking to other people. So we are recording it and we'll share it out, but it's important that we reach out to others and let them know about this work that's happening, because there's a lot of heavy negative conversations, and we want to try to find the positives. So, but that was it.
Thank you. Beth, do you want to share the slides?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, it was basically like who SEPAC SOMA is, but if you all go to our website, sepacsoma.org, it's all there. So, but thank you all for coming and everything. This has been really, really insightful and encouraging in many ways for different reasons.
We have a comment in the chat from Jess Mingus. She says, how is the district assessing classroom and school climates? Is qualitative data collection, interviews with caregivers of vulnerable students part of the data collection? I think a critical question to ask is learning accessible to your child? Do they feel safe and valued? So what's going on with qualitative data collection, Kerri?
Okay, well, that's an exciting topic right now. We normally use a lot of quantitative data. So especially when we're gathering information from families, we do for 6 through 8, we do our New Jersey Sky survey. We're actually looking to bring that down to K-5 or pre-K-5. However, this year for our equity teams, we've started to introduce a new protocol to gather data from families and from students, which is called Street Data. And basically, it really looks at how are we connecting with families to hear more? How are we connecting with students to hear more about their experience, to leverage students and families really as partners instead of I'm the educator, I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you, you know, what I think about the data. And so again, we just gave our what we do is we push into equity teams at the school level, and we're just teaching the protocol now. So I'm going to say not yet, but it's coming. We've done 5 schools to teach that protocol. My plan is over the next 4 weeks to do the other schools, and so we're hoping that schools can really start partnering with families in that way to really gather that data. And so, and we do have some qualitative data. I know in our integration survey, there's some qualitative data, but really getting down to that and really leveraging that information is important to us. And so we're definitely getting there.
So Jess Mingus just put in the chat, as the founder of the SOMA Peer Support and Action Network for IEP families, we welcome the opportunity to host a listening tour for district leaders. Please contact me. Emails in the chat, Kerri.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one last question for Ahadi. Could you give us a sense, Ahadi, of the racial makeup of the folks that participate at Jespi House and what challenges you've seen from the Black folks and the people of color that are in that community?
Sure. Our in terms of people of color, our, depending on different groups, but totally is approximately 25 to 30%. In terms of the African American community, the larger majority, which would be approximately 20% African American or Black. So in terms of self-identification. And in terms of special needs, I will say a big barrier that we see is getting our clients from being in the day program to residential. And that's really been a hardship because all of our programs have long wait lists, because there's so many people who really do need our services, and COVID showed an uptick in that as well. And so a lot of the clients that we have who want to transition can't afford, frankly, South Orange rents. And so Jespi has been doing a lot to try to develop more affordably priced housing so that our clients can get into our transition services to learn the skills they need to become independent and to live on their own. And then once they do so they have somewhere to go in terms of an apartment to rent. And so these are both issues that Jespi has taken on full on and is doing a lot of work in terms of trying to develop those types of opportunities for Jespi clients, because we want to also increase our diversity within our program as well. So that kind of says that. One thing I will say that I think there are also different areas of housing that we'll see. So we'll see, I've heard more, for example, clients of color say that they really prefer apartment living, say, than a shared house. So it means that we can't just say, oh, we'll just, get another shared house and that'll be it. We have to look at the different and diverse needs of our clients, because not everyone's the same. And so, different people have different interests, and it comes down to programming as well. The reason why, as I mentioned earlier, we have hundreds of programs in services each month is because we are trying to make sure that we are meeting the needs and responding to the needs and interests of our diverse clients. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I think that's a wonderful information for all of us just to know. So thank you. And Jess, do you want to say something? I'm sorry if I cut you off with that question.
So sorry. Hi, Vicky. And you totally didn't cut me off. Hi, everyone. I want to say thank you so much to both of our presenters tonight for this really important conversation. And, just wanted to say the second part of what I posted verbally, which is I you know, having created this group that now has over 300 community members in it, I couldn't have expected how much momentum would come out of this group and how much incredible support and care and generosity and also truly heartbreaking and alarming stories about what's going on for many families across this district of children who are classified, and particularly children of color who are classified. So I just want to really emphasize how excited members of our group, of this community, of the district, would be to have any additional opportunities to speak face-to-face and voice-to-voice about our everyday experiences and what we're hearing from our children, what we're hearing from fellow community members about some challenges that just feel very systemic, unfortunately predictable, and we think very much solvable if we can have more of a, you know, deeply collaborative kind of problem solving approach that includes more caregiver voice. Because on our side, continually what happens is that it feels like most of the communication coming from school centers around when there are problems. And so, you know, my hope in terms of addressing all of these really alarming data points about disproportionality, which we absolutely see all over the country, is for us to emphasize how important it will be for this district's future success, for caregivers, you know, some of the most critical and informed stakeholders in this discussion, to have a truly meaningful kind of opportunity to inform policy at this exciting point. Like, it is tangible to me how much the sort of energy and the conversation is changing because of you folks in the district doing this work. And that is the thing that I really hope for. And I think caregivers have so much to contribute to these conversations. So I just wanted to thank you for the presentation so much and just communicate how much I look forward to building this dialogue for our community and district. Thanks.
Thank you. Beautifully, beautifully put. Do we have any last comments? Any last questions? We're at 8:31, folks. It's Wednesday. It's been a long one.
I just want to request that everybody sign in really quickly. There's a link in the chat there. If you could just let us know that you were here.
Really quickly, thank you so much for the presentation. Will the slides be shared?
This was recorded, and I think,
Awesome.
Kelly, are we
Okay.
going to put it up on the SEPAC site? Yeah, so this was recorded for hopefully more folks that we share it with will find out this information, find out about different groups, about Jespy House, find out about the data and what the district is doing now to try to put us more firmly on a better track.
Thank you.
So again, I just want to thank all of you for being here, especially Kerri and Ahadi. Thank you, thank you. Happy Black History Month to all of you. And, you know, in solidarity and partnership, we will collaborate, you know, in our schools, in our community, and we'll do more, hopefully, collaboration between our schools and community, because so much of what Ahadi said and what Kerri is doing and what she shared with us, you know, everyone, it's been in the Fergus report. A lot of what we just heard, we've seen and has been talked about a lot. So I'm just hopeful that this will buoy and support and light a fire under all of our collaborative work, both together in schools, in the community, and across all of our bridges. So thank you all tonight for being here for our kids. So thank you.